basically, like what I was reading online is that like people who are really good at Rails and Ruby, they use a technique called deflection to like have their methods like kind of like dynamically generated according to like certain parameters that they pass in.
Yeah.
So maybe you could talk about that later too.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not, the two aren't really connected, but reflection is a form of meta-programming. And the term reflection actually is much more commonly used in Java than it is in Ruby, but it's the same idea. Reflection is when code is written to modify other code.
Well, I'm saying it is connected because like you can use reflection to generate methods on the fly.
Yeah, it's not really connected. Believe me. But anyway, I will definitely cover. It's very interesting stuff. It's stuff that Ruby is uniquely good at. The thing with the demo scripts is this. We're now in a position to basically have a comprehensive list of everything that you still need to do to have a successful demo day. We're close enough now, basically 4 weeks, that you should, and you really ought to, because it's going to save you a lot of headache, decide precisely what you want to show on demo day, and then sit with your team and decide precisely what bits of code still have to be written. And it goes from the sublime to the ridiculous. It could be, make this thing with all Ajax and everything's flying around, or it could be something as simple as put the link in the bottom of the search page. Try to make an exhaustive list of all the things that you have to do. And the only way you can make an exhaustive list is if you start with deciding what your demo is going to look like. Because if you're not going to be showing the page where the link is missing, you don't really need to prioritize putting that link in. But really try to make an exhaustive list of what still has to be done with your team. And you'll be surprised how long that list is if you do it right. Software projects are never, well, there's too much. More often, software projects are late, not because people underestimated how long it would take a certain task, but because they forgot about half the tasks that they had to do. It's much easier to be late and much more common to be late because you didn't really realize how long the list was. Any individual item, put a link on the page, if you're right or wrong about it by even 100%, it's not going to affect your final outcome. So try to be fairly, as a team, sit around and make a list and just write them down, every little thing. And that's going to help you figure out how to allocate your limited time between now and the end. Okay? So refer to your demo script for Showcase Day and make a clear list of what tasks still have to happen. Finally, think about the UI principles that we talked about the other week. I saw this in every example that I looked at, that you didn't sit back and think about how the user approaches the page, a page or the home page for the first time, and what the buttons are, or what the links are, or what the words are that they need to understand what they're supposed to do next. So try to get yourself into this like childlike mindset where you're looking at this page and going like, or show it to a friend or a roommate or whatever.
Explain like I'm 5.
Pardon?
Explain like I'm 5.
Explain like I'm 5, but really also tie it to the motivation, right? Okay, I'm going to go to Campus GPS. Okay, so I went to campusgps.com, and what am I doing? Okay, I went there because I don't know how to get to Bowling. So hopefully, very obviously on that page, there's going to be a button or something that says, enter where you want to go. If that's a little link in the corner, or if that's another page, you don't have a well thought out user interface. And that's true at every stage of the game. When you go to a margin call, why are you going? What is the first thing you want to do? What is the first thing you want to see? Think of it as, with a very childlike mentality, what button am I looking for? I walk up to a door, I'm looking for a door handle. Don't make the door handle in the top left corner. Put it right in the middle where I can see it. So, I know we talked about this. I know this is very common sense and nothing too profound, but try to apply it to your product. Okay? Excuse me while I tie my lace. All right, good. Let me check my camera aim here for a second. See, I didn't even bother checking it. Well, not too great, but not that this is very important. But anyway. Okay. All right, good. Just close this thing. Okay. All right. Any questions on that? Look at this list. Take it to heart. It's going to make a difference. Okay, now today we're going to talk about Ajax. And to talk about Ajax, we have to talk about JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. But I'm going to start Oh no, actually, before I do that, I want to show you the refactoring thing that I talked about before. I think I was messing around with Campus GPS. Sorry. Now, don't laugh because you all have the same thing, okay? I'm telling you. So here's Campus GPS. And I'm just going to go right for their controller. And I'm going to go right for this routes controller. So what's the mumble? Okay, so this looks good so far. Say what? What? Oh, you're right, it's the outdoor controller. I'm sorry, you're right. I would have gotten to it. Here we go. So here's this awesome method here called routing. I don't have to use fast. I don't have to scroll down to know this is a very, very fat controller. Okay? And I tried at home a few hours ago to decode it fully so I could refactor it, but I came up short because I didn't take enough time. But you can see basically there's something here going on with checking up there, actually. Now, go back up. There's something here looking at the parameters and making sure that the from and to are in the right order. Then there's a very big if statement. Then there's sort of running through all the paths to find something. Then there's the calling of the A-star algorithm to find the best path. Then from that, there's some more stuff going on. Then a search result is called against A-star because the search is an A-star.new. Then some answers come back. Some more past stuff happens. And then we switch into something having to do with the math that they have to do. And this is very tricky, by the way. So don't feel bad. This is some of the most trickiest functionality that any of the products are trying to do. So this is not. I'm not picking on it because it's easy. I'm picking on it because it's very ambitious, which is a good thing. But here they go into GMaps for Rails, and they're sort of building up, I think, the markers. So this is a really big method. So talk. Who can give some opinions on how they might go about refactoring this?
The helpers file folder, I feel like is a good way to, if I have large pieces of code that I want to put in,
yeah,
I always try to put it in the helpers method because I can call it in the controller.
That's good. That's a good impulse, but I will redirect it a little bit. Did somebody else have a hand?
Well, there was an if statement saying if building to and does not equal building from on the very top.
Yeah.
You can add validations in your forms.
Uh-huh.
Check it before going to the controller. More on top. I think.
Perhaps. But there's another disease which is too much, or any logic, any Ruby code in a HTML.erb file, which is pretty bad. So generally, you don't want to put it right in the controller. Yes.
I definitely think there's a lot of stuff you can put in the model.
In the model or in a model?
Well, in the model for this.
Okay. Right.
So like a lot of those methods that especially like the nested conditional or whatever, they put in the model.
Right. So you got the right impulse. I want to make a comment about helpers, not to, because it's an extremely common thought that I had for many years also. Helpers are meant generally to help the HTML pages. Generally, helpers are asked to produce HTML. So you might have a helper that produces the whole complicated HTML to display an image. Or you may have a helper to display some detail about a menu or something like that. But your impulse is exactly right. But I would just redirect it a little bit and say, let's create some service classes. What is a service class, by the way? There's a lot of people play around with these words all the time. Some of them are called presenters. They call them service class. They call them but anyway, there's various names. I'm going to call them service classes. And what I mean by a service class is just a class that's none of the other things. It's a class that's not a model. It's not a controller. It's not a helper. It's a service class. It's perfectly fair and correct to create a new directory under app that's called services, or take your pick. And in there you might put more and more class files, something.rb that would begin with class something, and it would have a body, and it would do something, all right? just like any other model. But the difference is that it's not dependent on Rails at all. It's just a class by itself. So if you think about that technique, then what you want to do is try to pull out parts of these things, if you think of them as paragraphs, that sort of are cohesive in some sense. And try to think if you can come up with a conceptual description of a class that would do that collection of work. So it's more than just a helper method, it's actually a helper class. So here's what I did, again, without really knowing what I was doing. So I went here and I said, first thing I did was, I took that if then else at the start, and I said, why don't we make it just a method on its own, called get from two buildings with params, and its job is just to assign at building from and at building to, and it's just an assisting method within the controller. Perfectly legitimate, small-scale change. But then I went, and here's where I ran out of gas, because I didn't know exactly how the code works, but I imagined that the routing action could become call get from two buildings params, create a new object called route planner, which in the initializer took two parameters, building from and building to, and then it would have a method called generate candidate locations, which would return a list of candidate locations in this instance variable, and then perhaps it would route planner.candidate paths would compute the set of paths, and finally route planner.locations.shown would create location shown. I just made it up. Okay, but the characteristics that are interesting here is that route planner, that class is going to be executing outside of the controller. It will not have access to the at anything, the at building from, at building to. It will not have access to any of the context of the controller. So what you're going to want to do is to give it arguments in the constructor or in other calls to pass to it the context that it's working in. Now, if we refer back to the original code that I was playing with, we'll see that all this business with under this if could be put into that path manager or whatever the right name for it is. But then if you look through it, you see that here they're calling the location model to look up things in the database. And that's okay, although I'm not crazy about making the new class that I define called the model, but it's still okay. So what you end up with in the ideal scenario is that the route planner class works by itself and can be tested. So you can do in your unit test, you can create a route planner and you can give it appropriate parameters and you can see whether each of these calls return the right value. And the beauty is now you're testing this route planner class without having to mess around with the controller, without having to run the product. You're kind of taking the engine out and putting it up on a test bed. And you win in many different ways. Because I promise you, you're going to find bugs in here which are going to be much easier to isolate and fix than if you were running this code inline in the controller. Because if you're running the code inline in the controller, then the only way you can see bugs is if somebody puts a number in, puts another number in, and the line gets drawn in the wrong way. Well, there could be 100 reasons why the line got drawn the wrong way. This way, by isolating it into its own class, it becomes much easier to test. Okay? So that's the general pattern you would see, is create one or more classes, which are not Rails classes, put them in a services subdirectory, and try to think about what is actually happening in this code from a conceptual point of view, and try to come up with the right reasonable methods. And if anybody does that and wants a second pair of eyes to look at the approach you're taking, and you want one of us to look at it, more than happy to do it. But there's a big payoff, and it's really also a good habit to get into. Yes?
Can you go back to the page you were on?
The code?
Yeah, the previous page.
This is the one, the way it was. This is my refactored version of it. Is this what you meant?
Oh, never mind. Yeah.
All set? Okay. Anybody else? Okay, good. So that's path controllers and how to make them thin. And again, if one of you, maybe not all of you work on it, but if one of you is responsible for your controller and you want some specific hints on how to do it, please call on us, okay?
Well, actually, I remember my question.
Okay.
Yeah, for that, the
This here?
function get from two buildings.
Yeah.
Instead of having two if statements, is it possible to just make instead of checking if you're basically checking if one is nil and the next one is nil, right?
No.
What are you doing?
Yes, that's what he's doing. Yeah, that's what they're doing.
Yeah,
But there's something else going on here, right? The building is building order.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
But instead of having two separate HTMLs, is it possible to just make one call for all things in params that are not nil?
Yes, but it's doing more than that. Once it sees that it's not nil, it's then assigning at building from one of them and at building to
But
the other.
I feel like you can consolidate that into
You may
one
be
line.
able to, but if you put them together, then you still have to decide whether you want to do this fine, because if this is nil, it's going to fail.
Right.
So putting them together is not so straightforward, but it's a good thought. Any other questions? All right. Good? All right, great. So let's talk about AJAX. Okay, so AJAX stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Now nowadays, people do plenty of AJAX without ever using XML, so that's just a historical artifact. Okay, but essentially what it is, and you've all seen it, it's when in a website, it's always about web browser, what you see in a web browser, instead of doing another get because you got a set of search results to display another page, which causes the whole screen to refresh. Instead, the search results or whatever appear somewhere on the screen without ever refreshing the whole page. That's the essence of AJAX. Okay, and the way that, and this relies on a feature that all browsers have, which is the ability to, if you think about, let me pop up a small step. In a browser, if I click on a link, what effect does that have? What technical effect does it have? Yes, it causes a GET to be sent to the server, to whatever the server, and the result in HTML is the new page that's displayed. So as a result, you see the screen flash. Even if you get the same page again, you see the screen flash. So this capability that browsers have is to perform a GET, not where the result is not going to be used to display a new HTML page. No, the result is actually going to return a little bit of JavaScript, and that little bit of JavaScript is executed. Okay, that's the critical cycle. Critical cycle is in background, so while you're looking at your page, a separate thread sends a GET to the server, and the server's promise is to return a bit of JavaScript, which the browser's promise is to execute that JavaScript and do whatever it does. And I'll show you this in gory detail in very, very shortly. Do whatever it does. I won't talk about unobtrusive JavaScript just yet. And I'll just quickly touch on response. Yes?
Would you still call it AJAX? I don't think it is AJAX. Would you still call it AJAX if the transactions happening in the app's own database? If you're hitting some sort of submit button on a form, but instead of refreshing the entire page, you're only a small portion.
Yeah.
But the server is your own server, not some API call.
Oh no, this is exactly the same. Yes, it would be your server. You would, by the way, play into your product. I would call it AJAX also if you didn't click on anything. You just sat there and watched, and the screen changed because some background thread happened on the server. It's not a technically defined term, so people can debate whether this is AJAX or not. But in general, the effect is seeing the screen change without flickering the whole web page. That's the general concept. As a quick aside, responsive design is a way of writing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript so that the same URL will render appropriately on a tiny screen, a middle screen, or a big screen. Okay? So I'm using Bootstrap here, and this gives you, without my doing anything, so it's very lame, responsive design. As I shrink it, eventually it goes, well, if I put this on an iPhone, it actually does a nicer job. But it's doing something half reasonable, so you can put this on a phone and you can actually read this thing. And I didn't have to do anything to get this to happen. But now, okay, and so that's the general idea of responsive design. And this was written a year ago when this was still new. The Boston Globe but they were one of the big first really intense responsive design sites. Oh, there's my. See how the layout just changes totally? And that's not easy. Now, this has an interesting connection to mobile. Here's why. If you're going to develop a mobile app, you have a couple of very, very big technical / strategic decisions to make. First one is iPhone, Android, or both. And then within that, mobile phone, tablets. That's one. Who do you want to target? That's kind of a business strategy kind of question. It has to do with who you think your users are, how urgent it is to have both of them at the same time. Then the second question is, do I build a native app? In other words, I write it in Swift, or I write it in Java, and I put it in the App Store and people install it? Do I write a responsive web app, which is to say, I just write really awesome HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, and rely on the shrinking and enlarging of the screen to do the right thing? Or third, do I write a hybrid app? And a hybrid app is kind of a native app in that you install it, you write it in Java or in Swift or in Objective-C, but some major parts of it are web windows, web views, which are rendering just HTML. And those are the three major options. Responsive design in its pure form, what I just showed you, is when you decide, really the way I'm going to solve addressing all these different platforms is by writing responsive HTML once. It turns out, and the market has flip-flopped on that question several times in the last several years, from one side to the other side to the middle and so on. Facebook, you might remember, at one point had a responsive app, which was terrible. Then they went and they wrote a totally native app, and now they have a hybrid app, and they developed this very, very sophisticated package of JavaScript, etc. I think it's called React or something like that, which is what they use to create their hybrid. So I'm just putting the whole concept of responsive design in the context of all the different technical options you have. For our purposes, of course, for our products, it's not an issue. Did you have a hand? No. It's not an issue. We're all going to use straight up web interface, and if necessary, or if you want to, you can make it responsive by using Bootstrap or using some other tool. There's other libraries different from Bootstrap, which do similar things. Some people like some better than others. Bootstrap happens to be the most common one right now, but next year it could be gone, which is the way this world works. Okay. That's just a little side trip. Oh, not that. Okay. So the use cases for Ajax are, this is my list. I'm sure there's others. Asynchronous update, which is the first one. The page changes without the user doing anything. Type ahead, which is what you see in Google when you're typing a search, it tells you. And by the way, as an aside, what you don't know is it's actually starting to write the result HTML for you. So when you hit enter, the answer will come quicker because it's already sent the HTML over. So that's a whole different fancy thing. Delayed rendering, which is to say, a very long, like the infinite scroll is a good example of that. You've all seen infinite scroll, where you keep on hitting down and you see more. That's Ajax. In-place editing, obviously forms where you're typing not into a floating type here box, but actually editing on the page. And finally, server push, which server push is, and I have a demo, I'm going to try really hard to get to it, where we both are looking at the same website. You do something, let's say, add a record, and my screen, without my touching the computer, the record appears. Also very common, obviously, in any real-world web app that's multi-user. That's another version of Ajax. So that's what the server is pushing out to you. Okay? And here's again what I said before in words. So let's talk a little bit about JavaScript. So I happen to think that even though I'm not very good at JavaScript yet, I should be. I think JavaScript may be the most important language right now. Why? Well, first point is JavaScript has nothing to do with Java. It just happens to share the name, and that's a political thing that happened back.
Sure, syntax too.
No, not really. No, except for semicolons. Otherwise, it's quite different. They all share they all inherit from the C kind of look or the Pascal kind of look, but they're quite different languages, different semantics, dramatically different semantics, and different syntax as well. No, it has to do with the fact that I don't remember the companies anymore, but there was a battle going on between, pardon? It might have been Netscape, right? Who developed the language to run in the browser. Java was very hot at the time. They didn't want to sound like they were creating another language just for the hell of it, so they called it JavaScript. Now there's something called ECMAScript, which stands for anybody? ECMA? I don't remember what it stands for. European Standards Body that's taken over the standardization of JavaScript. So if you hear about ECMAScript, that's just the standardized version of Java.
Oh, I mean, well,
go ahead.
That's what ActionScript is based off. Like Flash is based off ActionScript.
Okay, I don't know, but ECMAScript is today the official public standardized version of JavaScript is ECMAScript version N. 5, I'm not sure. 6?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, I've talked before about the DOM, and the DOM is essentially what you see when you look in the debugging page. Okay, that's the DOM tree. This is like as if you did a put S on the data structure called the DOM. So when the browser parses HTML, okay, it generates, as you can imagine, a big honking data structure in memory representing the HTML. Okay. But the thing that's interesting about DOM is that not only does it generate the DOM when it reads in the HTML, but it maintains a direct connection with what's displayed. So if somehow the DOM is modified by code, in particular by JavaScript, the screen changes automatically without refreshing. And that's one of the core bits of technology that allow you to have Ajax. Because what you end up doing is write a bit of JavaScript, which goes in and surgically modifies a certain tag and changes from an H1 to an H2, and without anything else being visible, the text gets bigger. Okay? Close this again. So let me show you a little bit of JavaScript playing. God almighty. What? I need another desktop. Okay. CD, my dev. What the hell is it called? Bootstrap demo? No. I have to go grab it off GitHub. Yeah. You can grab this off of GitHub if you want, if you're interested. So by the way, people that are using their iPhones during class, I find it very distracting. So if you have to make a call or you have to check your email or something, just step outside. I won't hold it against you, but it's really, really distracting. So I appreciate it if you don't do it. Hey. Okay. No, I don't do that. Yeah, double that. Okay. So let's look at some code here. I'm going to start with, and you can try this. It's kind of fun.
Do you have it up somewhere?
I do. It's on GitHub. Look in Cosi166b Ajax demo. You can clone it. And if I open the first test, which is going to call demo1.html, don't go there. Bring it back. Okay. All right. So here's a bit of HTML. It has two buttons. I click the first button, and without flashing, it changed text. No flash. Right? I click the other button, and without flashing, it displays a sailboat. Very, very simple. Let's look at the code. The code has the text, a button with an on-click parameter calling a JavaScript function called change.html, tag called 1, which is this one, to string 1. And string 1 is found somewhere else. Notice this block here in the head. Can actually be anywhere. When the browser encounters this script, end script, there's numerous things that can be in here, but if it looks like this, it's going to look for a file called demo1.js. Let's take a look at demo1.js. Demo1.js, very, very simple. String 1 is look at it, quoted, h2, blah, 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 close quotes. It's just a regular string. And string 2 is quoted, it's just a regular text string with source, HTTP, travel, and blah, 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 blah. And then here's a method called change.html. Takes two parameters, the ID and the new HTML. It does a trace, which I'll show you in a second. It just traces this to the console. And then here's where the magic happens. Now, document, object model, DOM, they often refer to the whole thing starting in HTML to end HTML as the document. So the document, get elements by ID, looking for a certain ID, get its inner HTML, and replace it with the new HTML. All right, very simple. So if we refer back to the program, here's the button I pushed. On click, change HTML. That's the ID. Look at that. That corresponds to this. And string 1 is the string that it wants to replace it with. So string 1 is actually being defined in the other file. Everybody follow that? It's very simple, but I have to jump back and forth to show you. The key thing, or one of the key things, is this call. Document.getElement by ID is looking for an element called 1. It's looking for the inner HTML to 1, and it's replacing it with a new string. So, going back here, here's 1. All this stuff is the inner HTML. It's going to replace it with a new string, which means that when I click the button, in fact, if we look in here, we can see that this thing that's highlighted is ID equals 1. That's going to be replaced fully. So when I hit this button, look closely. Oh, actually, let me open it up. There's the button, right? I click the button. You see how it changed? It changed. And remember when I said, if the DOM changes, the screen changes automatically. Any change to the DOM is reflected here. In fact, I can go further and say, if that's true, I can edit this and say, hello, Brandeis, and it changes. Okay? Yes?
So when I was reading yesterday on Ajax,
Yeah.
I came across a lot of articles that said that one of the problems with using Ajax
Mm-hmm.
is in situations where, like, say you're at a workplace and their proxy blocks all the JavaScript from rendering.
Right.
So what happens in a situation like this when the JavaScript can't be rendered? Does the page just display the text at the top in normal HTML and just everything else is blank? Is there an error?
No. I mean, there's errors. I mean, essentially, if you're trying to call this method, change HTML, which is the method that was defined in my .js file, the method's not there, you're going to get an error. Now, where's the error displayed? The error is displayed in the console, which most people don't see. But if you look closely when you run your app, you will see a little red number here, and I bet you every one of your apps has a non-zero number here when you play with it, because it's very easy to have JavaScript errors. So it does something reasonable. Reasonable, I should say. It doesn't blow up. It doesn't crash. But I'd also say that nowadays, in my opinion, you don't have to worry about that. You could write all kinds of, safety code, if no JavaScript. But anybody who knows JavaScript, the web doesn't work anymore. Yeah.
Is it possible to add to the DOM, like
Yes.
from JavaScript? Because I was trying to do this, where I was trying to add a tag with a given ID,
Yeah.
and then try to use document.getElement by ID on that ID.
Yeah.
But it would say it didn't exist.
It works. I mean, you probably had some kind of JavaScript can be very hairy. In fact, I had to post to Stack Overflow a couple times myself to get this to work. So it's fun because as I admitted at the beginning, I'm not an expert. Anybody here is an expert in JavaScript? Quasi expert, medium expert? Okay, so we're at the same level. Okay, what?
I'm a really good Googler.
What?
I'm a really good Googler. I can copy and paste.
Oh yeah. Okay.
what I want to do.
Okay, so let's go on. Let's look at demo2.html. So now let me first just open it and remember what it does. Okay. So, oh, my battery. Hang on. Okay, so let's look at demo 2. Demo2.html and demo2.js. So demo2.js does one thing very, very, very simple. It does document.write and the string. That's all it does. Document.write means where the script tag was that invoked this JavaScript file, put this text. So this JavaScript file is going to get executed because you included it over here. You see here? I have, right in the middle of the body, I have scripts. No, this is just this. Where's the include thing? Here it is. So basically it said, run demo2.js. If it's in the head, it's as if you wrote the text here. So basically it would put the text, that this thing was rendering, because remember it said, this red is really awful, isn't it? Let's change it. There, much better. So basically where this inclusion is of the demo2.js, this code says write h1 document.write and blah, 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 and that's what ends up being here. So here's an example where the DOM, something was added to the DOM that wasn't there before. Okay? How am I doing on time here? Woo. I'm going to do only a few more, and then I'm going to jump to the next thing I want to show you. In fact, I'm going to skip all this. I'm going to skip all of it. All I want to say is JavaScript is a full-fledged language. Now, by the way, why do I think it may be the most important language around right now? It's got two characteristics that no other programming language I know of has. One, it runs on every single platform you can think of, including Apple Watch, Pebble, or your big mainframe, whatever it is. Runs everywhere. And the second thing that makes it so important is it has, I think, without having data, the highest amount of investment by big companies and smart programmers in making it fast. So Google invests huge amounts, Apple invests huge amounts, other people invest huge amounts in making JavaScript extremely fast. Why? Because the speed of the web depends totally, or is one of the things that affect it heavily, is the speed of JavaScript. And so there's massive investment. I mean, I'm not talking joking around stuff. I'm talking about, research labs with PhDs doing leading edge language research to squeak out another 3% of performance out of JavaScript. So that makes it a very, very important language. But the other interesting phenomenon about this is that people don't really love it as a language, as a programming language. And so around there have appeared many other syntaxes for writing JavaScript, like CoffeeScript and things like that. People have written other syntaxes that sort of hide some of the ugliness of the JavaScript syntax. People have even used it as a VM, where languages that have nothing to do with JavaScript compile down to JavaScript. Seriously, because the JavaScript execution is so fast. So I think it's a really, really important language. And that's why I think I should know more about it than I do. Okay, Let me go back to the. Okay. Question?
No, I was just asking, like,
If you're confused, let me go confused. Ask for it.
yeah, exactly. So, like, normally when I want to change it to HTML on the website, I have to display something.
Yeah.
I can refresh it.
Exactly. Yeah.
But in the case you just demonstrated, it does on the fly.
Right.
So what's going on in terms of working?
Sure. So what's going on is, if you think about it, if you were asked to implement a browser, somebody said, hey, here's HTML, and remember HTML is just a programming language. Write a interpreter for HTML, and what you want it to do when it gets executed is to display what the browser would display. That's your assignment. So you go, okay, great. I'm going to write a parser. I'm going to read the stuff in. And I'm going to then, well, do I just start drawing the screen? No, because layouts may change to something later. Plus, if somebody hits refresh at the same instant, I want to recompile it. So what I do is I build this big data structure. And the data structure corresponds precisely with every detail to what the text of HTML corresponds to. And then what I'll do is I'll use what they call a listener pattern. A listener pattern is where you make the renderer observe, or it's the observer pattern also, observe that data structure, and any little change in that data structure is reflected immediately in what you see. That's the crux of it. So once you have that established, you have this data structure called the DOM, and you have this rendering engine, WebKit or whatever, and the rendering engine is looking at the DOM, and any change is reflected immediately. Now you have the makings to answer the question. If I can write another piece of code that goes in there and makes one little change in the DOM data structure, it's immediately displayed.
But certain times I do have to refresh it, so why is that?
Because they're not using Ajax. Because when you refresh it, it's pulling it back.
What you just did with the console, that was Ajax.
Well, it was JavaScript.
Okay.
So they're not using JavaScript in that way. So if you have to refresh it, I mean, again, there's always exceptions. By and large, if you have to refresh it, it means you're asking the server, give me the HTML again. Now, to confuse things even more, there's a whole new class of architecture people call single-page applications, where, in fact, the model view controller logic happens in large part in the browser as MVC. And people like that because you can make an experience that's a little bit more almost like a mobile phone, and you can have a much more responsive experience because now if I add a record, it doesn't have to go back to the server to add the record. It actually adds the records, redisplays, and then in background tells the server to add the record. So that's a single-page application, and there's massive work going on in that. You might have heard things like Ember or Meteor or Anyway, Volt. There's numerous of these things, and they're all of them very, very sophisticated JavaScript programs, basically.
So is the idea behind what you just described
Yeah.
that you're going to be using the power of whatever and as opposed to sending it back?
Yeah. So this is the tooling, the underlying nuts and bolts, upon which this edifice can be built, called a single-page application with MVC built into the browser. But if you pick up a book on Meteor, pick up a book about Angular, pick up a book about React, pick up a book about, it goes on, and you can easily find battles where people say your suck, mine is greater. So this is an area with a lot of churn right now. But they all sort of sit on top of the basic facts that I just described, which is the data structure called the DOM, the code can modify, the picture changes. Okay? Okay, good. All right, we're going to look at some code. I did a nice update, I think it was nice, of the code. So I'm going to show it to you, and if you want, you can. It's on GitHub again. CD. What the hell is it called? Form and pusher demo. Subble that. And let me run it. It's a Rails program. And I'm going to show you what it does. Oh, server's already running. Okay, thank you very much. Is it already running? Let me just see. Or is it just leftover crap? Oh, it is already running. Okay. So here it is. Here's the home page for this particular. It's related to the search example you guys worked on, but it's elaborated further. So I have here a list of all the items. And I'm going to show you two little tricks that this thing does. I hit search, and it displays a search box like you guys did for the homework. And if I search for red, watch closely. Okay? So that's Ajax. Did you see that? Didn't flicker, it appeared right there. We do it again. Nothing blue, I guess. Okay. Great. Oh. Shoe. Okay? I hit enter. I hit enter with my hand. It could have, but. Okay? Yeah. Oh, that's not a hand. Okay, good. So let's see how this. Let me show you one more thing, and then I'll show you how it works. Yeah. Okay, now keep an eye on this here, comment 0. Keep an eye there. I'm going to work on the left window, and I'm going to say Torpedo, hello world. Keep an eye on that number on the right. Okay? Different window. So this could have been on your computer. That's the server push. Now the funny thing is that we're talking about less than 30 lines of code. But it took a long time to get it to work. Because you got to find the right 30 lines of code. In GitHub, as I was preparing for this, I added a better README. Oh, I didn't push it, I guess. Okay. This is called Spawn and Pusher Demo. Let me push it. Okay, why are you not working? No. Oh, maybe. Oh, I know, because it had different branches. Yep. I got to go to the branch called Revive. There it is. So I have information here about how I did it. But let me give you a tour. Let's start with Ajax. Okay, so first we take a look at, I can make this screen this bigger so we can see it a little better. First we take a look at the controller for items. And first, actually before that, take it back, we're going to look at the view, the search view. Here. All right, a lot of noise here, so let me just show you. The important thing to look at is the line 3. Form tag. The first thing is the action that's going to get called when the search is pressed. The second thing is the method. I wanted to use a get. Here's one you haven't seen before. Remote true. It's a very powerful extra bit. And that's the beginning of the mechanism that's going to make Ajax work again. Remote true, meaning I want to make this execution of this form happen remotely. And then the next thing that is important is that, maybe that's all that's important here. Okay? One more thing that's important. Down here, there's a div class, forget about class, which includes another div which has ID search results, but no text. This is invisible at this point. However, I've given this invisible spot in my DOM a name called search results. And that's how the domino starts tumbling. Because if I can get some code to modify the DOM and replace this div with a bunch of results, then it would look as if the search came out without flickering. So that's my mission, right? Is to get some JavaScript to run to do that. How do I do it? Okay. So we will now go look at items controller. What gets called is do search. And this is a setup to display the search form. We've covered that before. Do search happens when I click the button, but it's happening in background. So the sequencing is different. But starting with very simple things. I'm going to get stuff out of the search form, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to call item equal, and then I'm going to call a new method that I wrote on the item model to generate the list results. So far, it's exactly what you've seen before. But instead of returning the HTML like what you would have done normally, instead I say, just format, just render JS, just render JavaScript. Here's how the sequence works. You click the button in the browser. The browser in background issues this get, do search, waits until it gets something. The screen has not flickered. Whatever it gets back, it executes as JavaScript. It executes it. And so if that bit of code does the right thing to my DOM, it's going to do what I want, right? So recall that at this moment in time, at items contains the list of items that match the search. Now I turn our attention to another file. The file is called dosearch.js, which has only one line. Can you believe it? Okay, it has one line. That line says, look for an ID called search results, pound search results, get its HTML, and replace it with this string, noticing that it's a percent equal. So before this JavaScript is generated and returned to the server in the background, it's going to get converted into a longer JavaScript file with whatever that partial search results generates. Tricky. I had to rehearse it myself at home to remember how it works, because it's tricky. So now we're going to go look at, not rehearse it, but reread it. We're going to look now at the file called search results. Remember, it's a partial. Partials always start with an underscore. So there it is. And we've seen this before. So it's just going to generate a bunch of HTML corresponding to what I want the search results to look like. Okay? So the sequence of events, again, goes like this. You click the search button. In background, the browser sends a get to the server to the doSearch method. The doSearch method prepares its information and invokes the doSearch.js.erb, which expands into a block of JavaScript, which when executed will surgically modify that ID I showed you at the very start. And so, there it is, ID search result. Think about it. Think about it. See if you can reconstruct it in your head. Who's totally, no, totally lost. Okay, that's, you got it, right? No. Yes, sir. Ask questions.
In the
I'll actually have 2 more minutes.
in
Sorry.
the partial that you had, what was index? Like, what was the index that you rendered
Okay.
when you found
Oh, good point. Very good point. Yeah. Here's the partial. It's at items. Oh, what's index? It's the same thing I use to generate the home page. It's not that one, actually. It's underscore index, this one. It's a partial. It's the same thing I used to generate the home page. So I'm reusing that same list. Okay? It's complicated, but this is how you can make it work. So, and the funny thing is, or the interesting thing is, even though it's complicated to understand, the amount of code is very small. And so if you want to do some AJAX, if you define precisely what you want it to do, you can use this as an example to sort of get the hang of it. So that's AJAX. Any questions? Any little bit of further? You want me to repeat the sequence again, or is that not going to help? Not going to help? Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Got 3 minutes. I'm not going to use it for the pusher. I'll do that on Tuesday. Pardon? Oh, excellent. God, I always get it wrong. What's my excuse? Oh, because my other class starts at 5, it ends at 6:20. This is filter. Okay, good. Then I am going to do pusher. Great. Awesome. All right. So pusher uses the same concept, obviously. It's going to modify the HTML for that one comment item, but this time it's not as a result of my server returning an answer. Instead, what it is that if you imagine two people with two computers, I add a comment in mine. There's some code in the place where the comment is added, which says to a magic server in the cloud, push this message out to all subscribers. You have another computer running the same app. You have said, I'm a subscriber to that, and you just wait. Whenever the first computer says, I've added a comment, all the subscribers get a message saying a comment was added. And then they use the same techniques of AJAX to modify the line. Yeah.
But I thought that the whole idea with HTML and REST was so that each transaction, each conversation between a user's computer and the server is one-off. It's one get. So the relationship after a get, the relationship between the two computers should be broken.
Correct.
So how do we push?
Yes. Very, very excellent point. Good insight. We're going to a totally different communication channel. This is not REST anymore. This is now something called WebSockets. WebSockets, and I can't give you any technical detail about it, is the mechanism whereby the browser can open a receive connection, which is unheard of up to now, to a server. It says, I'm listening, and if you want to send me a couple of bytes, I will take them. And the reason it's a special thing is because it's designed to allow 1,000 browsers to all have a WebSocket opening to the same server without causing a terrible load on the server. So it's pretty special, and it's pretty new. I mean, the whole WebSocket concept is I don't know how old, but no more than 5. Yeah.
Any security problems with this?
Not inherent, but you have to code to make sure that you cover your bases. I mean, it can be done securely. And it's used all over the place, obviously. Whenever you have that happen, that's the way it works. I just was listening to an interview with the guys that build Rails, who implied that, well, he said that it's very possible that Rails 5, which is going to come out in the fall, is going to have WebSocket support built into it. Right now, I'm using another service called Pusher, I think is what it's called. Where I have a free account because the amount of volume is very little. And so Pusher acts like, the publish, subscribe service. And basically I declare an application and I get a magic number, and each of my apps, my server, my Rails server, embeds this magic number in all the web pages so that all its clients know what the app number is. And so when a change happens in the model, adding a comment, it tells this guy, publish to all the subscribers. Each of these clients has independently, and I'll show you how this works, connected to the server with a WebSocket, and they get told of the change. Okay?
How does the server keep track of who's communicating?
Code. I don't know. But that's why it's a very difficult thing to do. The problem is not if it's one or two. The problem is thousands, hundreds of thousands. Then it becomes a very difficult problem. Performance-wise, security-wise, apps crash, you have to close the socket, that kind of stuff. So let's take a quick look at how this might work. So I actually had the list of places to look. Where's the code? Where's the code? Nope, that's not it. Nope, 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 nope. Okay, let me just go GitHub. Oh, yeah. This one. Look at the review. Oh, Oh, I got to change the. By the way, if you try to go to this code, get the branch called revive, which is what this morning I was reviving it after a year of not using it, and pusher. So we begin with in the gem file. This will require a pusher gem. Let's look at the comments controller, because remember, the comments controller is the one that gets called when I add a new comment, right? And we see at the top these parameters, which I got from pusher when I signed up for my account. One of them was the app's ID, and then there was 2 cryptographic keys to make sure that I'm who I am and they're who they are. So that's part of the security answer. So that's set up. I'm requiring the pusher gem, of course. Next thing I do is we look at the create comment, the create action. By the way, how can you tell a method in a controller whether it's actually an action or not? Whether it's a controller action or just another method? How can you tell? How can you tell? You can't? Dimitri, how do you tell? Nope. How do you tell? Sorry, what's your name again? Vladimir. Vladimir, some other Russian name. Vladimir, sorry. Huh? Not sure. Huh? Routes. Say more. Dimitri. Yeah. Stop laughing, it's not that funny. Yeah, the routes will tell you that the action is named, and that the methods in the controller that have a name from the routes are controller actions. The rest are just helper methods. Okay, so we look at the create action because it's called when I create a new comment, and it does the usual thing, and then it calls this method push count, and it says what the ID is of the item that just got commented, and how many comments that item has right now. So just 2 parameters. And then we look down to push count, and we see that it calls pusher, which is the class of the inductive gem, and it says trigger a message. That's now where the individual server is sending the message to the pusher service to say that there's a change, and we can create a channel, which is just a text string, and a little hash that contains whatever it is that I want to send. And essentially that hash is my definition, and what I happen to want to send is the item ID and the count. And that gets sent up to this guy, and this guy then sends it to everybody. Okay, so now let's look what happens on the other end. In the end, there's a couple of more things to show, but I'm going to just jump to assets JavaScript item.js. So we go up here, and here. And this thing says, this app, which by the way is embedded in every page, it says, open a connection to the pusher. Now, one of these browsers is declaring its presence to the server. Open the channel to this browser, to the pusher server. Tell it that I want to subscribe to the message channel called form demo channel. And then I say, when you get the comment event, remember this is JavaScript, execute this code. And this code says, compute element ID as being the string comment count dash item ID. The ID of every line that says comment 0, comment 0, comment 0 corresponds to, it has an ID corresponding to the number. And then finally it does what we saw before. Document.get element ID, is that thing. In HTML is the count. Okay? So to illustrate this real quick, if we go to look inside this thing, we look at the search results. These are all these rows that we just looked at. Oops. These rows are these things here, TR, TD, 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 right? No, those are all headers. And no, I want the comments, which is the next one. Okay, look closely at this. Look closely at this. It says, href, this is the link I want to go to if I click on the word comment, is this. Then it puts a parenthesis. That's that parenthesis. Then it says span ID equals comment dash count dash 5. That's the magic. That's how the JavaScript knows exactly where that number 0 is to change it to 1. So I actually wrote the template for this row to put that ID that's different for every row in here, and that's how we find that one occurrence of the number 0. Okay? So now this is analogous in some ways to the Ajax example I showed you. The server notices that something's changed. It tells the publish subscribe server called pusher there is a new message to be sent to all your subscribers to this particular channel. And that message is ID 41, comment ID 41, should be now a 3. Each of the browsers, when the page is first rendered, tell the publish subscribe server, I'm ready to receive messages, and when I get a message, call this little bit of JavaScript. That little bit of JavaScript gets those 2 parameters and modifies the page, all without linking the screen. All right? Okay, I know it's kind of a lot to take in, and it's pretty complicated. But this is, once you understand this, you understand how all this stuff works. All right. Quickly jumping to what happens on next week. I think I covered everything actually, so that's pretty good. There's links to all this code on the web page, and you can find it in my GitHub directories. And just quickly for Tuesday, Ajax. We're going to talk about scaling and things like that, but really, I want you to spend all your energy on getting your demos as good as possible for the presentations with your product reviewers. Consider that your homework. All the hours you would spend on homework, spend it on that, okay, as a team. And I'm going to give you clues on Tuesday on exactly what things that you want to make sure you prepare for your PR. But in brief, it is remember that they're coming in for you, so the more specific questions you have, feedback on individual things from Ajax to schema to whatever, ask those questions, give them a demo, hopefully following your showcase day presentation, show them your list of stories or your to-do list per what I discussed earlier, and expect them to look at your code, so if you have a chance to do some diets on your controllers, that would be great. But at this point, all hands on deck is to get to a great showcase. All right? Thank you. See you next week. Have a good weekend.
See if I can get the advanced.